rain hammered against the glass walls of the Mansour Grand Hotel as Khalid Al Mansour stepped out of his black Bentley, his tailored suit worth more than most people's annual salary. At 42, he commanded a hotel empire spanning 3 continents, yet his eyes held the hollow emptiness of a man who had lost everything that truly mattered. "Sir, please," came a small voice from the shadows near the hotel entrance. "Just one meal, sir." Khalid froze. 2 children, no older than 10, stood huddled together in the London rain. Twins. A boy and a girl with dark hair matted against their faces, their clothes torn and dirty. But it wasn't their desperate condition that stopped his heart. It was their eyes. Eyes he had seen every night in his nightmares for 8 long years. "What did you say?" Khalid whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. The little girl stepped forward, her brother's hand clutched tightly in hers. "Just one meal, sir. We haven't eaten in 3 days." And in that moment, as lightning illuminated their faces, Khalid al-Mansour saw ghosts from a past that had destroyed him. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You won't believe how this unfolds. The security guard approached aggressively. "Move along, you little beggars. This is a respectable establishment." "Wait." Khalid's voice cut through the rain like a blade. Something about these children stirred memories he'd buried deep. The way they held each other, protective and desperate, reminded him of... No, he couldn't go there. Not again. For 8 years, Khalid had built walls around his heart, transforming from a loving father into a cold business machine. The night his 2-year-old twins, Layla and Omar, had vanished from their London home had shattered him completely. Despite hiring the world's best investigators, offering reward money that could buy small countries, and following every lead across 6 continents, they had simply disappeared without a trace. His marriage crumbled under the weight of grief and blame. His wife Sarah couldn't bear looking at him, seeing in his eyes the same devastating loss that consumed her. They divorced within a year, both drowning in separate oceans of despair. "Sir?" The girl's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you okay?" Khalid stared at her. When had a homeless child ever asked about his well-being? "What are your names?" "I'm Layla," she said, her chin lifting with surprising dignity despite her circumstances. "This is my brother Omar. We're not beggars, sir. We're just hungry." The names hit him like physical blows. Layla, Omar, the same names he'd whispered into empty rooms for years, hoping somehow his lost children might hear him across whatever void had swallowed them. "How old are you?" Khalid managed to ask, though his throat felt constricted. 10, Omar spoke for the first time, his voice cautious but clear. "We've been 10 for 3 months now. 10 years old. The age his children would be if they were still alive, if they had survived whatever nightmare had claimed them on that terrible night 8 years ago." James Morrison, the hotel manager, appeared at Khalid's shoulder. "Mr. Al-Mansour, I apologize for this disturbance. Security will handle the situation immediately." "No." Khalid's voice was firm. "Bring them inside." James looked shocked. "Sir, with respect, the hotel's reputation is built on hospitality," Khalid finished. "These children asked for 1 meal. We'll provide it." As they walked through the opulent lobby, Khalid noticed how the twins stayed close together, their eyes wide with wonder at the crystal chandeliers and marble floors, yet never releasing each other's hands. Just as his own children had done, joined at the hip, inseparable since birth. In the hotel's private dining room, Khalid watched as Layla and Omar ate with careful politeness, despite their obvious hunger. They didn't grab or fight over food like children raised on the streets might. Instead, they shared equally, making sure each got the same portions. "Where are your parents?" Khalid asked gently. The twins exchanged a look loaded with pain far beyond their years. "We don't remember," Layla said quietly. "We've been in different places for as long as we can remember. Foster homes, orphanages. The last place," he shuddered. "We ran away 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks on the streets." Khalid felt anger rising in his chest. "What about the authorities, social services?" Omar's laugh was bitter. "They just send us back to places like Grimwood House." "Have you ever been hungry for so long that your stomach stops hurting, sir? Have you ever been so cold that you stop shivering?" The raw honesty in the boy's voice cracked something inside Khalid's carefully constructed emotional fortress. These children had experienced horrors no child should endure, yet they maintained their dignity, their love for each other. As the evening progressed, small details began to accumulate in Khalid's mind. The way Layla hummed unconsciously while eating, a melody that sounded hauntingly familiar. How Omar instinctively touched his left shoulder when nervous, right where Khalid's own son had a distinctive birthmark. The way they both pronounced certain words with the faintest trace of an accent, that could have been Arabic. But these observations warred with harsh reality. Khalid had investigated thousands of leads, followed up on hundreds of sightings, met countless children whose desperate parents hoped might be his lost twins. Hope had become his enemy, a cruel master that inflicted fresh wounds each time it proved false. "Sir?" Layla's voice interrupted his brooding. "Thank you for the meal. It was the best food we've had in, well, maybe ever." As they prepared to leave, Omar suddenly stopped and stared at a small decorative item on the table, a silver prayer wheel that Khalid carried everywhere, one of the few personal items he kept from his former life. "That's pretty," Omar said softly. "It looks like something from a dream I sometimes have." Khalid's blood turned to ice. The prayer wheel had been a gift from his grandmother, passed down through generations. His children had played with it constantly as babies, fascinated by its intricate Arabic engravings. "What kind of dream?" Khalid asked, his voice barely steady. Omar looked confused, as if trying to grasp something just beyond his memory's reach. "There's a man with kind eyes who sings in a different language, and there's a woman with long dark hair who smells like flowers. But when I try to see their faces clearly, they disappear." The description could have fit a million families, yet something in the way Omar spoke, the specific details, made Khalid's heart race. He found himself studying the boy's face more intently, looking for any familiar feature, any sign that might confirm the impossible hope blooming in his chest. But hope was dangerous. Hope had nearly destroyed him before. As the twins disappeared back into the London night, despite his offers of hotel accommodation, which they politely declined, Khalid stood at his penthouse window, staring at the city lights. 8 years of searching, of following dead ends and crushing disappointments, had taught him to be cautious with his heart. Yet something about Layla and Omar felt different. The way they moved together, the protective instincts, even their mannerisms. It all echoed memories of 2 toddlers who had once been the center of his universe. His phone buzzed with urgent business messages, board meetings, and acquisition deals worth hundreds of millions. But for the first time in years, Khalid al-Mansour found himself thinking about something more important than money. Somewhere in the London rain, 2 children were sleeping rough, carrying dreams they couldn't quite remember and stories they couldn't quite tell. And despite every rational thought warning him against it, Khalid couldn't shake the feeling that his long nightmare might finally be approaching its end. What would you do if you encountered children who reminded you of your greatest loss? Let us know in the comments below. The next morning brought London's typical grey drizzle, but Khalid was already dressed and waiting in the hotel lobby by 06 a.m. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with questions and possibilities he'd tried to suppress for years. "Sir?" James Morrison looked surprised to see his boss up so early. "Is everything all right?" "I need you to organize a search," Khalid said without preamble. "Those 2 children from yesterday, I want them found." Discreetly, James hesitated. "Mr. Al-Mansour, with respect, we run a hotel chain, not a missing persons agency." Khalid's gaze was steel. "Then hire professionals. I want the best private investigators London has to offer. Cost is irrelevant." By 09 a.m., 3 different investigation teams were combing the streets around the hotel. By noon, they'd located the twins sheltering in an abandoned warehouse 6 blocks away, sharing a single blanket and a tin of beans they'd somehow acquired. When Khalid arrived at the warehouse, his heart clenched at the sight. Layla and Omar had created a small nest in the corner, using cardboard and newspapers for insulation. Despite their dire circumstances, they'd organized their few possessions neatly and had even drawn pictures on the wall, simple sketches of a house with a garden and 2 figures that might have been parents. "You came back," Layla said, surprise evident in her voice as Khalid approached. "People don't usually come back." "I'm not most people," Khalid replied gently, "and I have a proposition for you both." Over the next hour, Khalid learned fragments of their story. The twins had been in the system since they could remember, shuffled between foster families and institutions. Their most recent placement, Grimwood House Children's Home, had been a nightmare of neglect and worse. "Mrs. Grimwood said we were problems," Omar explained with the matter-of-fact tone children use to describe their traumas. "She said twins were twice the trouble and half the profit." "Profit?" Khalid's jaw tightened. "The government pays for each child," Layla said quietly. "But if you don't spend the money on the children," he didn't need to finish. Khalid's business mind immediately understood the horrific arithmetic of neglect and abuse, disguised as childcare. "What if I told you that you never had to go back to places like Grimwood House?" Khalid asked carefully. "What if I could arrange for you to stay somewhere safe, where you'd be properly cared for?" The twins exchanged one of their loaded glances, entire conversations passing between them in seconds. "Why would you help us?" Layla asked with heartbreaking directness. "We're nobody special." The question pierced Khalid's heart. These children, who should have been cherished and protected, couldn't even imagine why someone might care about their well-being. "Because everyone deserves to be safe," he said. "And because—" He paused, struggling with how much to reveal. "Because you remind me of children I once knew." That afternoon, Khalid's lawyers worked overtime to arrange temporary fostering agreements. Within 48 hours, Layla and Omar were installed in a comfortable suite at the Mansour Grand Hotel, with private tutors, new clothes, and all the security and care money could provide. Yet Khalid remained cautious about getting too emotionally invested. These children needed help regardless of any personal connection he might imagine. Even if they weren't his lost twins, and statistically they almost certainly weren't, they deserved rescue from the system that had failed them. But as the days passed, the resemblances became harder to ignore. Omar had night terrors, waking up crying in Arabic, a language he claimed not to understand. When Khalid gently questioned him about it, the boy looked confused. "Sometimes words come out in the scary language," Omar said. "I don't know what they mean, but they feel safe, like someone used to sing them to me." Layla had an unusual habit of arranging her food in specific patterns before eating, creating small geometric designs with her vegetables, exactly the same quirk Khalid's daughter had exhibited as a toddler. Most unnervingly, both children seemed to know their way around the hotel's complex layout instinctively, as if they'd been there before. When questioned, they couldn't explain their familiarity with the building. "It just feels like home," Layla said simply. The statement hit Khalid like a physical blow. The Mansour Grand Hotel had been one of his first major acquisitions, purchased just months before his children disappeared. He'd brought baby Layla and Omar to see Daddy's new hotel several times, carrying them through the halls and letting them explore. Could they possibly retain some deep, unconscious memory from when they were barely 2 years old? Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist Khalid had hired to help the twins adjust, was intrigued by their behavior patterns. Childhood trauma can suppress explicit memories while leaving implicit memories intact, he explained during one of their sessions. Her child might not remember visiting a place, but their body might recognize the environment. It's like muscle memory for emotions. Could they have lived here before? As very young children? Khalid asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Dr. Chen considered this carefully. It's possible. Children who experience sudden separation trauma sometimes develop amnesia about their early years as a protective mechanism, but proving such a connection would require more than behavioral observations. That evening, as Khalid tucked the twins into their beds, a routine that felt both foreign and achingly familiar, Omar grabbed his hand. "Sir, Khalid, can I ask you something?" "Of course. In my dreams, there's a man who sings a song about stars. Do you know any songs about stars?" Khalid's breath caught. Years ago, he used to sing his children to sleep with a traditional Arabic lullaby about stars watching over sleeping children. It had been his grandmother's song, passed down through generations. Without thinking, he began to hum the melody. Omar's eyes widened, and tears began streaming down his face. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the song from my dreams. But why does it make me so sad?" Across the room, Layla sat up in bed, her own eyes glistening. "I know that song too," she said quietly. "It makes me think of being safe." As Khalid finished the lullaby, both children had fallen asleep with peaceful expressions he'd never seen on their faces before. Standing in their doorway, watching their quiet breathing, Khalid felt something he hadn't experienced in 8 years. He felt like a father again, but the rational part of his mind kept warning him against hope. Too many false leads, too many crushed expectations lay behind him. Even if these children stirred something deep in his heart, even if they seemed to carry fragments of his lost family in their unconscious memories, the chances of them actually being his Layla and Omar remained infinitesimally small. Yet as he returned to his own suite, Khalid found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a folder he'd labeled before, photos from his former life, when he'd been a husband and father instead of just a businessman. There was baby Layla, reaching for the camera with chubby fingers. Baby Omar, laughing at something just out of frame. And there in dozens of pictures were moments of pure family joy that the tragedy had made him forget. Looking at these photos now, then thinking of the children sleeping down the hall, Khalid began to see similarities that went beyond wishful thinking. The curve of Layla's smile, the way Omar's eyebrows drew together when he concentrated, small details that might mean nothing or might mean everything. His phone rang, interrupting his brooding. The caller ID showed Detective Inspector Rebecca Shaw, the lead investigator on his children's disappearance case. They'd spoken perhaps twice in the past 3 years, their conversations growing shorter and more hopeless each time. "Khalid, I hope I'm not calling too late. Something's come up regarding your case." His heart rate spiked. "What kind of something?" "We've received new information about a trafficking ring that was operating in London 8 years ago. Children were taken and sold through a network of corrupt care facilities. The timeline matches your twins' disappearance." Khalid gripped the phone tighter. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying we might finally have a lead worth following. Can you come in tomorrow morning? There are some records I'd like you to review." As Khalid hung up, he looked down the hall toward the twins' room. Somewhere in the London night, answers might finally be waiting. But first, he had to find the courage to hope again, knowing that hope might be the most dangerous emotion of all. The morning couldn't come fast enough. Detective Inspector Rebecca Shaw's office hadn't changed in 8 years. The same cluttered desk, the same wall of unsolved cases, the same air of determined frustration that seemed to permeate every police station Khalid had ever visited. "Khalid, thank you for coming so quickly," Rebecca said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. At 45, she'd aged visibly since they'd first met, grey streaking her auburn hair, new lines around her eyes testament to the weight of cases like his. "You mentioned a trafficking ring," Khalid said without preamble. 8 years of false hopes had taught him to cut straight to the heart of matters. Rebecca opened a thick file folder. 3 weeks ago, we arrested Marcus Grimwood on charges of child abuse and financial fraud. During questioning, he gave up information about a larger network that operated between 2010 and 2016. The name Grimwood made Khalid's blood run cold. "The same Grimwood from the children's home where your current wards fled from, yes. It seems Marcus inherited the operation from his mother, Victoria Grimwood, who died 5 years ago. But Khalid, what Marcus told us about his mother's activities—" Rebecca paused, her expression grim. She slid several documents across the desk. Police reports, financial records, and most chilling of all, handwritten ledgers that recorded children like inventory. Victoria Grimwood wasn't just running a substandard children's home. She was stealing children and selling them through an international network. Babies and toddlers were the most valuable, easier to place with new identities, less likely to retain memories of their original families. Khalid's hands trembled as he reviewed the ledgers. Dates, ages, and prices filled page after page. Children reduced to profit margins. "A timeline," he managed to ask. "Does it match?" June 15th, 2014. 2 entries. Rebecca pointed to a specific page. Twin subjects, male-female, approximately 24 months. High-value placement. The date is 3 days after your children disappeared. The room seemed to spin around Khalid. For 8 years, he'd imagined every possible scenario. Kidnapping for ransom, tragic accidents, even the possibility that Sarah had taken them and somehow covered her tracks. But he'd never considered that his children might have been commodities in someone's horrific business. "Where did they go?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That's the problem. Victoria Grimwood was careful about records for local placements, but international sales were handled differently. We have evidence of children being sent to various European countries, some to North America. Others simply disappeared into the system." Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. However, Marcus mentioned something interesting. His mother kept a few high-value children in the local network, moving them between different facilities under false identities. He found it safer than international transport, and she could monitor their development. "You think my twins might have stayed in London?" "It's possible. Marcus gave us a list of facilities his mother worked with, places where children would be placed with forged documents and false backgrounds." He handed him a printed list. Khalid scanned the names, recognizing several as institutions he'd actually investigated during his desperate search years ago. "I visited some of these places," his voice hollow, showed photographs, asked questions. "With falsified records and deliberate identity obscuration, you might have been looking at your own children without knowing it." Victoria Grimwood was exceptionally skilled at making children disappear, even when they were hiding in plain sight. The implications hit Khalid like a physical blow. How many times might he have been in the same building as his stolen children? How many near misses had there been over the years? His phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. "The children are asking for you. Omar had another nightmare and Layla won't eat breakfast. They want to know when you're coming back." Khalid showed Rebecca the message. "The twins I'm fostering. They were at Grimwood House until 3 weeks ago. The timing seems suspicious," Rebecca finished. "Khalid, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. These children you're helping, Have you had them DNA tested? The question hung in the air like smoke. DNA testing meant either final proof or final heartbreak. For 8 years, Khalid had avoided definitive answers, partly from fear, partly because each negative result had been a small death. No, he admitted. I've been afraid to hope that much again. Rebecca leaned forward. Given what we now know about the Grimwood operation, I think you need to consider the possibility that these children might be exactly who you think they are. An hour later, Khalid sat in his car outside the police station, Rebecca's words echoing in his mind. Inside his jacket pocket was a business card for a private laboratory that could process DNA results within 24 hours. But before he could take that irreversible step, he needed to see Layla and Omar again, to look at them with this new knowledge coloring his perception. The drive back to the hotel seemed to take forever, London traffic conspiring to delay what might be the most important conversation of his life. He found the twins in their sweet sitting room, Layla reading to Omar from a children's book. The sight stopped him cold. It was exactly how his original twins used to spend quiet mornings, Layla always the more verbal one, Omar content to listen to his sister's voice. "Khalid!" Layla looked up with relief. Omar had the scary dream again, the one with the loud voices and the dark place? Omar nodded solemnly, but this time I remembered something else. There was a woman with mean eyes who said we weren't allowed to remember the before time. The before time? Khalid asked gently, settling into a chair across from them. It's what we call the time before we can remember clearly, Layla explained. We know there was something before the Holmes and the foster families, but when we try to think about it, our heads hurt. Dr. Chen had mentioned this phenomenon, traumatic amnesia that could block early childhood memories while leaving emotional impressions intact. What if I told you there might be a way to find out about your before time? Khalid asked carefully. A test that could tell us who your original family was. The twins exchanged one of their wordless communications. Would it hurt? Omar asked. No, it's just a small sample from inside your cheek. But the results might tell us things that could change everything. Change how? Layla's voice was cautious. Khalid took a deep breath. It might tell us that you have a family who's been looking for you for a very long time. A family who never stopped hoping you'd come home. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Finally, Layla spoke. If we took this test, and if we found our real family, would we still be together? Omar and I? Always, Khalid promised, though his heart was racing. No matter what the test shows, you two will never be separated again. Omar looked at his sister, some complex negotiation happening in their shared glance. Okay, Layla said finally. We want to know about the before time, even if it's scary. As Khalid made the call to arrange DNA testing, he realized that within 24 hours, he would know whether the greatest tragedy of his life had somehow transformed into its greatest miracle. But first, he had to survive the longest day of waiting he'd ever experienced. The DNA laboratory felt like a cathedral of science, all sterile surfaces and quiet efficiency. Dr. Amanda Foster, the geneticist handling their case, had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of professional gentleness that came from delivering life-changing news on a regular basis. This is a simple process, he assured Layla and Omar as they sat in her office. Just a quick swab from inside your cheek and we'll be able to compare your DNA to Mr. Al-Mansour's. Khalid watched as the twins underwent the procedure with remarkable composure. They held hands throughout, Omar squeezing Layla's fingers during his turn, Layla offering encouraging smiles when it was her brother's turn. How long for results? Khalid asked, though he already knew the answer. 24 hours for preliminary findings, 48 for comprehensive analysis. Given the significance of this test, I recommend we wait for the full results. 48 hours, 2 days that would either reunite a family or confirm that hope was indeed Khalid's cruelest enemy. The twins seemed less affected by the waiting than he was. They spent the first day exploring London properly for the first time in their lives, riding the London Eye, visiting the Tower of London, experiencing childhood joys that had been stolen from them by circumstances beyond their control. Watching them discover simple pleasures, Khalid found himself noting more details that seemed familiar. The way Layla tilted her head when concentrating, identical to how his wife Sarah used to listen to music, how Omar instinctively organized objects into neat patterns, a behavior Khalid recognized from his own childhood. But the most striking moment came that evening during their hotel dinner. The twins were sharing a dessert, carefully dividing portions with mathematical precision, when Omar suddenly looked up at Khalid with an expression of startling intensity. Why do you look sad when you watch us? he asked with the directness that only children possess. Khalid was caught off guard. What makes you think I look sad? Your eyes, Layla answered. They're happy and sad at the same time, like you're seeing something we can't see. How could he explain that every moment with them was simultaneously joyful and heartbreaking, that their unconscious mannerisms and forgotten fragments of behavior painted pictures of children he'd lost and might have found again? Sometimes adults carry old sadness, he said carefully, even when they're happy in the present. Omar considered this gravely. Is your old sadness about children? The question hit too close to home. Why would you ask that? Because when you sing the Star Song, you sound like someone who misses children very much, Layla said quietly. And sometimes when you think we're not looking, you stare at us like we're going to disappear. Their perceptiveness was both touching and painful. These 10-year-old children, who had survived horrors that would break most adults, were offering comfort to a grown man struggling with his own emotional wounds. Yes, Khalid admitted. My old sadness is about children who went away a long time ago. Did they die? Omar asked gently. I don't know. They just disappeared one day and never came back. The twins absorbed this information with the serious attention they gave to everything important. Maybe they didn't really disappear, Layla suggested. Maybe they just got lost and couldn't find their way home. And maybe, Omar added, someone found them and took care of them until they could come back. Their innocent optimism was both heartwarming and devastating. If these children weren't his lost twins, their words were simply kind comfort from young hearts that understood loss. But if they were... Khalid's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Dr. Foster's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Al-Mansour, I know we said 48 hours, but the preliminary results were so clear that I wanted to call immediately. Could you come in tomorrow morning? And please bring Layla and Omar. What do the results show? Khalid asked, his heart pounding. I'd prefer to discuss this in person, but Mr. Al-Mansour, you should prepare yourself for significant news. After hanging up, Khalid found the twins watching him with concerned expressions. Was that about the test? Layla asked. Yes. We'll get the results tomorrow morning. Are you scared? Omar asked. Khalid considered lying, offering adult reassurances and false confidence. But these children had survived on truth and resilience. They deserved honesty. Yes, he said, I'm terrified. It's okay, Layla said, reaching for his hand. Whatever the test says, we'll still be your friends. Omar nodded seriously. And if the old sadness goes away, that would be good, right? As Khalid tucked them into bed that night, he realized that regardless of what DNA science revealed tomorrow, these children had already changed his life fundamentally. They'd reminded him what it felt like to care about someone else's well-being more than his own. They'd shown him that hope, even dangerous hope, was better than the emotional numbness he'd cultivated for 8 years. Sweet dreams, he whispered, turning off their bedroom lights. Khalid, Omar's voice came from the darkness. If we are the lost children from your old sadness, will you be our daddy again? The question hung in the air like a prayer, full of longing and fear and possibility. If you are those children, Khalid replied softly, I never stopped being your daddy, not for a single day. In the morning, they would learn whether 8 years of searching had finally led him home. Dr. Foster's office seemed smaller, with the 3 of them sitting across from her desk. Khalid could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, while Layla and Omar sat quietly, their hands clasped together, as always. Before I share the results, Dr. Foster began, I want to explain what we tested for. We compared Layla and Omar's DNA to yours, looking for paternal matches across multiple genetic markers. She opened a thick folder, though Khalid suspected she already knew the contents by heart. The results are unambiguous. Dr. Foster looked directly at Khalid, her professional composure unable to hide her amazement. Layla and Omar are your biological children. The probability of paternity is 99.97%. The words hit Khalid like a physical force. 8 years of searching, of following false leads and crushing disappointments, and the answer had walked up to him in the rain, asking for just one meal. I don't understand, he whispered. How is this possible? But even as he asked the question, he was looking at his children, with new eyes. Now he could see Sarah's nose in Layla's profile, his own stubborn chin in Omar's serious expression. Features that had been hidden by malnutrition and trauma, but were emerging as they grew healthier. Are you saying we're really your children? Layla asked, her voice small and wondering. From the before time? Yes, Khalid managed, tears streaming down his face. You're my Layla and Omar. You're the children I've been looking for every day for 8 years. Omar stared at him with wide eyes. But we don't remember you. You do, Dr. Foster interjected gently. in ways you might not realize. The Arabic phrases Omar speaks in his sleep, the songs that make you both feel safe, those are memories from when you were very young. Traumatic separation can block explicit memories while leaving emotional and sensory memories intact. We pulled out additional documentation. Based on what you've told me about their behavior patterns, I believe Layla and Omar have retained unconscious memories of their early childhood with you. That's why they felt comfortable so quickly, why certain songs and objects seemed familiar. Khalid knelt in front of their chairs, bringing himself to their eye level. I know this is confusing. You don't remember me because you were only 2 when bad people took you away, but I never stopped looking for you, not for a single day. Layla reached out tentatively to touch his face, her small fingers tracing the tears on his cheeks. You're really our daddy. I'm really your daddy. Omar was quiet for a long moment, studying Khalid's face with intense concentration. Then suddenly his expression changed, as if some deep recognition was surfacing. Star Song, he whispered. You used to sing it to us when we were little, in a room with blue walls and toy elephants. Khalid's breath caught. Their nursery had indeed been blue, decorated with a parade of stuffed elephants that Sarah had collected throughout her pregnancy. And there was a lady, Layla added, her own memories seemingly triggered by her brother's words. She smelled like flowers and had long hair. She used to read us stories about brave children. That was your mama, Khalid said softly. Sarah. She died 2 years ago, but she never stopped looking for you either. The revelation that their mother was gone brought fresh tears, but also seemed to unlock more fragmented memories. Over the next hour, sitting in Dr. Foster's office, pieces of their stolen childhood began emerging. Omar remembered a garden where they used to play. Layla recalled a special blanket with stars on it. Together, they reconstructed fragments of birthdays, bedtime routines, and quiet moments that Khalid had thought were lost forever. What happens now? Layla asked eventually. Now we go home, Khalid said. Really home, and I get to be your daddy again if you want me to. The twins looked at each other, conducting one of their silent conversations. We want that, Omar said finally. But will you promise never to let anyone take us away again? I promise, Khalid said fiercely. No one will ever separate our family again. As they left the laboratory, Layla slipped her hand into Khalid's left hand while Omar took his right. Walking between them, Khalid felt something he hadn't experienced in 8 years. He felt complete. But even as joy flooded through him, Khalid knew their journey was just beginning. Layla and Omar had survived 8 years of trauma and neglect, rebuilding their relationship, helping them heal from their experiences, and creating a new family dynamic would take time, patience, and probably more love than any of them knew they possessed. The most important thing, though, was that they would face those challenges together. For the first time in 8 years, Khalid Al-Mansour was taking his children home. The penthouse apartment in Dubai seemed different, with children's voices echoing through rooms that had been silent for years. Khalid watched from his study doorway as Layla and Omar explored their new home, their movements cautious but increasingly confident. It's so big, Layla whispered to her brother, her voice carrying in the marble-floored space that suddenly felt more like a museum than a home. And so high up, Omar added, pressing his face against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Dubai's glittering skyline. Khalid realized with growing concern that his carefully curated bachelor existence wasn't suitable for children who'd spent years in institutional settings. The apartment was beautiful, but cold, full of expensive art and furniture with sharp edges, devoid of the warmth and safety children needed. What do you think? He asked, joining them by the windows. Too fancy? Doesn't feel like a home yet, Layla said with her characteristic honesty. It feels like another hotel. Her words stung because they were accurate. In his grief, Khalid had created a living space that was more showcase than sanctuary. These children needed something entirely different. Then we'll change it, he said decisively. We'll make it feel like home. What would make you both comfortable? Over the following days, the sterile penthouse underwent a dramatic transformation. Sharp-edged furniture was replaced with comfortable sofas. The formal dining room became a family space with a table sized for intimate conversations rather than business meetings. Most importantly, 2 bedrooms were completely redesigned, not as generic children's rooms, but as spaces that reflected Layla and Omar's emerging personalities. Layla's room filled with books, art supplies, and a reading nook by the window where she could watch the city lights. Omar's space featured building blocks, puzzles, and a telescope for stargazing, interests that had surfaced as he grew more comfortable expressing his preferences. But the physical changes were easier than the emotional ones. Both children struggled with nightmares, waking up crying from dreams they couldn't fully explain. Dr. Amira Hassan, the child psychologist Khalid had hired in Dubai, explained that recovering suppressed memories could be as traumatic as the original experiences. They're processing 8 years of survival trauma while simultaneously recovering their earliest memories, Dr. Hassan told Khalid during one of their sessions. It's an enormous psychological load for children their age. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after their return to Dubai. Khalid was working late in his study when he heard Omar screaming from his bedroom. Racing down the hall, he found both children in Omar's bed, Layla holding her brother while he shook with terror. "The dark place," Omar sobbed. "They're taking us to the dark place again." "It's just a dream," Layla whispered, though her own face was pale with fear. "We're safe now. Daddy won't let them take us." Hearing her call him Daddy naturally, without prompting or hesitation, nearly brought Khalid to his knees. But Omar's distress demanded immediate attention. "Tell me about the dark place," Khalid said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It was where they took us first," Omar said through his tears. After the loud voices and the scary people, it was cold and dark, and there were other children crying. But there was a lady there," Layla added, her own memories apparently triggered. "Not a mean lady. She tried to help us. She had kind eyes, and she whispered that our daddy would find us someday." Khalid felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. "What did this lady look like?" "Old," Layla said, "with grey hair, and she wore a necklace with a cross." "She knew our real names," Omar added. "Even when they tried to call us different names, she whispered Layla and Omar when no one was listening." The description sparked something in Khalid's memory. During his years of investigation, he'd interviewed dozens of care workers, social workers, and administrators. One woman stood out: Margaret O'Brien, a retired nurse who'd worked at several London facilities before returning to Ireland. The next morning, Khalid's investigators tracked down Margaret O'Brien to a small cottage in County Cork. At 73, she was hesitant to speak over the phone about her work years, but when Khalid described the twins, her response was immediate. "Dear God in heaven," she whispered, "Layla and Omar. I've prayed for those children every night for 8 years. Are they safe?" "They're with their father," Khalid said. "With me." Margaret began to cry. "I knew it. I knew you were real. Those poor babies kept saying, 'Daddy, find us,' in their sleep, and everyone thought it was just wishful thinking, but I could see it in their eyes. They weren't forgotten children. They were lost children." Over the course of a long conversation, Margaret filled in crucial gaps in the twins' story. She'd worked at the initial holding facility, where stolen children were processed before being distributed to various placements. Victoria Grimwood had run the operation with ruthless efficiency, but Margaret had tried to protect the children when possible. "I kept their real names alive," she explained. "Even when their documents said different names, I whispered their true identities to them. I hoped someday it might help them remember who they really were." "What happened to them after that facility?" "They were separated initially, Grimwood's standard practice to make children more manageable. But Layla became so distressed that she stopped eating entirely. Omar started having seizures from the stress. Against protocol, I convinced my supervisor to reunite them, claiming it was medically necessary." Margaret's intervention had saved not just their sanity, but quite possibly their lives. "There's something else," Margaret continued. "I kept records, unofficial ones, but records nonetheless. I documented every child who came through our facility, their real names when I knew them, their conditions, where they were sent. I always hoped someday someone would need that information." 2 days later, Khalid flew to Ireland to meet Margaret O'Brien in person. The elderly woman greeted him at her cottage door with tears in her eyes and a thick photo album in her hands. "I've been waiting 8 years to give this to their father," she said. The album contained photographs Margaret had taken secretly, children playing, sleeping, eating their meals. On page 47, Khalid found them. 2 small figures holding hands in an institutional playground, their faces thinner than he remembered, but unmistakably his children. "I tried to document proof that these children had lives before they were stolen," Margaret explained, in case someone ever came looking. But the album's most precious gift came near the end. A single photograph of the twins sleeping, curled together on a narrow institutional bed. Tucked between them was a small stuffed elephant, one from their original nursery that had somehow survived their kidnapping. "They never let go of that toy," Margaret said. Even when other children tried to take it, even when administrators threatened to confiscate it, they protected it like it was a piece of their souls. Khalid stared at the photograph, remembering how the twins had slept with that particular elephant every night until their disappearance. Somehow, across 8 years and multiple placements, they'd kept this tangible link to their former life. "Where is it now?" he asked. "I don't know. They had it when they left our facility, but after that," Margaret shrugged sadly. "So many things get lost in the system." Flying back to Dubai, Khalid carried Margaret's album and a new understanding of his children's resilience. They hadn't just survived 8 years of institutional care. They'd actively fought to preserve pieces of their original identity, even when they couldn't consciously remember why those pieces mattered. That evening, as he tucked them into bed, Khalid showed them Margaret's photographs. "We remember her," Layla exclaimed. "She was the kind lady who sang Irish songs, and she always made sure we got extra food when the mean people weren't watching," Omar added. "There's something I need to ask you about," Khalid said gently, showing them the photograph with the stuffed elephant. "Do you remember this toy?" Both children's faces lit up with recognition and longing. "Elliot," Omar whispered. "His name was Elliot. We lost him at one of the bad places. He was soft and grey, and he made us feel safe," Layla added. "We looked everywhere, but someone must have thrown him away." Seeing their sadness over this lost connection to their early childhood, Khalid made a mental note. Some things could be replaced, even if they couldn't be recovered. 2 weeks later, a package arrived from London. Inside was a grey stuffed elephant, identical to the one in Margaret's photograph. Khalid had commissioned a toy maker to recreate Elliot from the photos, using the same fabric and construction techniques. When he presented it to the twins, their reaction was instantaneous. Omar grabbed the elephant and buried his face in its soft fur, while Layla reached out to touch one of its ears. "It's not exactly Elliot," he said carefully, "but it feels like him." "Sometimes," Khalid said, "when we can't get back exactly what we lost, we can create something new that carries the same love." That night, for the first time since returning to Dubai, both children slept through the night without nightmares. In the morning, Khalid found them in Layla's room, the new elephant between them, sunlight streaming through windows that no longer seemed too high up. Omar was teaching Layla a card game while she helped him with a puzzle. "Daddy?" Layla looked up when she noticed him in the doorway. "Can we help you with your work today?" "What kind of help?" "Omar thinks we should help other lost children find their families," he explained seriously. "Like Margaret helped us, and like you helped us." Standing there, watching his recovered children plan ways to help others, Khalid realized that his greatest tragedy had indeed become his greatest purpose. Not just reuniting his own family, but ensuring other families wouldn't endure 8 years of searching and separation. The journey from "just one meal, sir," to "how can we help other children" had taken almost a year, but every step had been necessary. Every moment of doubt, every breakthrough, every setback had led to this moment, his children whole and healing, ready to transform their survival into service. As Omar might say, some dreams were worth remembering, and some families were worth fighting for, no matter how long the battle took. 18 months after that rainy London night, Khalid stood before an audience of 200 delegates at the International Conference on Child Trafficking. But this time he wasn't alone at the podium. "My name is Layla Al-Mansour," his daughter said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident. "And this is my brother Omar. We were stolen children," Omar continued, his words carrying the weight of lived experience. "But we were also found children." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word as the 12-year-old twins shared their story with world leaders, law enforcement officials, and child welfare advocates from 6 continents. Khalid watched from the side of the stage, his heart swelling with pride and pain in equal measure. The children who had once begged for a single meal were now addressing presidents and prime ministers, their testimony helping to shape international policy on child trafficking. "People think lost children don't remember anything," Layla explained to the audience. "But we remember feelings. We remember being scared, but we also remember the kind people who helped us. Like Margaret in Ireland, who whispered our real names so we wouldn't forget who we were," Omar added. "And like our daddy who never stopped looking for us." The presentation continued with a documentary about the Al-Mansour Foundation's work over the past year. Since its establishment, the foundation had helped reunite 47 families, provided support for over 300 children in the care system, and worked with law enforcement to shut down trafficking networks in 12 countries. But the Foundation's most innovative program was the Memory Project, using advanced DNA databases, behavioral analysis, and recovered memory therapy to help identify stolen children who had been placed in care systems under false identities. The technology exists to solve these cases, Khalid explained to the conference. What we lack is coordination, funding, and political will. Children like Layla and Omar are living in institutions around the world right now, waiting for someone to recognize that they're not orphans, they're stolen. During the question period, a delegate from Germany raised her hand. Mr. Al-Mansour, what would you say to parents who are currently searching for missing children? Khalid looked toward his twins, who nodded encouragingly. I would tell them what my children taught me, he said. Hope is not foolish, even when it seems impossible. Love doesn't diminish with time or distance, and sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as the smallest requests. He paused, remembering that rainy night outside his hotel. Her child asking for just one meal might be asking for much more than food. They might be asking to come home. After the conference, the family returned to Dubai, where their penthouse had been transformed once again, this time into the operational headquarters for a foundation that now employed over 100 people across 4 continents. But the most important transformation was in the children themselves. Layla had developed into a voracious reader with particular interest in psychology and international law. Omar had discovered a talent for technology, creating apps and programs designed to help missing children communicate with authorities even when they didn't speak the local language. They attended Dubai International Academy, where they were popular students known for their kindness toward new arrivals and their uncanny ability to spot children who were struggling with family issues. Their teachers had learned to watch for the twins' subtle signals, a particular look they'd exchange when they noticed a classmate being bullied, or the way they'd quietly include isolated students in their activities. They have an instinct for recognizing children in distress, their counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, explained during a parent conference. It's as if their own experiences gave them a special sensitivity to others' pain. At home, their evening routine had settled into comfortable patterns. Homework at the kitchen table, while Khalid prepared dinner, family meals where they shared stories from their days, and bedtime conversations that had evolved from therapy sessions into genuine father-child bonding. But Omar still occasionally woke from nightmares, and Layla sometimes became overwhelmed by crowds or sudden loud noises. Dr. Hassan assured Khalid that these reactions were normal for children who'd experienced extended trauma. Healing isn't linear, she explained. They'll have setbacks and breakthroughs for years to come. The important thing is they feel safe enough now to process their experiences. One evening, as Khalid was reviewing foundation reports, Layla appeared in his study doorway. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. He settled into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where desperate business partners and board members once sought his attention for million-dollar deals that now seemed insignificant compared to bedtime stories and homework help. Do you ever wish things had been different, that we hadn't been taken away and you hadn't lost all those years? The question was more profound than most adults posed, but Khalid had learned to expect unusual depth from children who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. I wish you hadn't suffered, he said honestly. I wish you hadn't spent years feeling scared and alone, but the people we've become, the family we are now, I wouldn't change that. Even though you had to wait so long to find us? Layla, every single day of searching was worth this moment, worth having you and Omar safe, healthy, and home. He nodded solemnly, processing his answer with typical seriousness. Omar thinks we're supposed to help other families because we understand how much missing hurts. You think that's true? I think, Khalid said carefully, that we're all supposed to use our experiences to help others, whether those experiences are good or bad. What matters is how we transform our pain into purpose. Is that what you did? Transformed your pain into purpose? The question stopped him cold. Was that what had happened? Had the 8 years of desperate searching and crushing disappointments somehow prepared him to build something meaningful from his family's reunion? I think, he said slowly, you and Omar transformed my pain into purpose. I was just lucky enough to find you before I forgot how to hope. That night, as he made his final rounds checking on his sleeping children, Khalid found them in Omar's room, sharing the rebuilt elephant and talking quietly in the darkness. Daddy's listening, Omar announced, without turning around. We weren't saying anything private, Layla added. We were just talking about tomorrow. What about tomorrow? The new children starting at school, Omar explained. The ones from the refugee center. We want to make sure they feel welcome. That's very thoughtful. We remember what it feels like to be the new children, who don't know if anyone will be kind to them, Layla said simply. Standing in their doorway, Watching his recovered children plan acts of kindness for other displaced children, Khalid realized that their story wasn't really about loss and recovery at all. It was about transformation. The transformation of tragedy into triumph, of desperation into determination, of a broken family into a force for healing others. The children who had once asked for just one meal were now feeding hundreds of families around the world, offering them the most important nourishment of all, hope that love could overcome any separation, any trauma, any period of darkness. In the end, that rainy night in London hadn't just reunited a father with his stolen children. It had reminded the world that some hungers can only be satisfied by coming home. 5 years after that life-changing night in London, Khalid Al-Mansour stood in the garden of the new Al-Mansour Family Reunification Centre in Geneva, watching his 17-year-old twins address a crowd of international dignitaries, survivors, and advocates. The centre, built on the grounds of what had once been an abandoned institutional complex, now housed the world's most advanced facility for identifying and reuniting trafficked children with their families. Its success rate of 73% had revolutionized international approaches to child recovery. When we were 10 years old, we didn't know who we really were. Layla spoke into the microphone, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had transformed personal tragedy into global change. We knew we were brother and sister. We knew we belonged together, but everything else was shadows and fragments. Omar stepped forward, his twins' natural complement in all things public and private. What we've learned over the past 7 years is that identity isn't just about remembering your past, it's about choosing your future. The audience, composed of heads of state, Nobel laureates and celebrities who had championed their cause, listened with the rapt attention reserved for voices of authentic experience. Our father spent 8 years searching for us, Layla continued, but we also spent 8 years searching for him, even when we didn't know that's what we were doing. Every time we held on to each other in scary places, every time we refused to give up hope that somewhere we had a real family, we were searching. Behind them, a massive screen displayed statistics that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. 12,000 children reunited with families through the Foundation's programs, 847 trafficking networks dismantled, 23 countries that had implemented the Al-Mansour Protocol for rapid DNA testing and family verification. But Khalid's attention was focused on his children, no longer the traumatized 10-year-olds who had appeared in his life like answered prayers, but confident young adults who had chosen to dedicate their lives to ensuring other families wouldn't endure what theirs had survived. Layla was beginning her final year at the International School of Geneva, where she served as president of the Human Rights Club and had already been accepted to Harvard Law School's early admission program. Her focus would be international family law, with particular emphasis on child welfare policy. Omar had taken a different path, combining his technological talents with his understanding of displacement trauma. His app, Find Me Home, used AI and crowdsourced data to help missing children communicate their circumstances to authorities, even when language barriers existed. The app had been downloaded over 2 million times and had directly contributed to 340 successful reunifications. Both twins had also become accomplished public speakers, sharing their story at conferences, universities, and government hearings around the world. But they insisted on always appearing together, their bond unbreakable after everything they had survived. The most important thing we want people to understand, Omar was saying to the Geneva audience, is that stolen children never stop being someone's son or daughter. Time doesn't erase that connection. Distance doesn't break it. Even trauma can't destroy it completely. And parents never stop being parents, even when their children are taken from them, Layla added, glancing toward Khalid with a smile that still had the power to stop his heart with gratitude. Love doesn't have an expiration date. After the ceremony, the family walked through the center's main hall, past walls lined with photographs of reunited families. Each image told a story of separation overcome, of hope vindicated, of love proving stronger than the worst human intentions. "Are you proud of us?" Omar asked as they paused before a particular photograph. Themselves at age 10, the day after their DNA results had confirmed their identity, standing on either side of Khalid with expressions of wonder and emerging joy. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it," Khalid replied honestly. "I'm amazed by you every single day. Even when we're difficult teenagers," Layla teased. "Especially then. Your mother would have loved seeing who you've become." The mention of Sarah, a regular part of their conversations now, brought the comfortable melancholy it always did. Through therapy and time, the twins had constructed a relationship with the mother they barely remembered, built from Khalid's stories, photographs, and the few recovered memories that had surfaced over the years. "Do you think she knows?" Omar asked. "About the foundation, about all the families we've helped?" "I think," Khalid said carefully, "that love like hers doesn't end with death. She's part of everything good we've built together." That evening, in their Geneva apartment, the family maintained their traditional routine of dinner together, followed by individual time for homework, reading, or personal projects. But now these moments carried different significance. Instead of trauma recovery and memory reconstruction, their conversations centered on university applications, foundation strategy, and the normal complications of teenage life. Khalid often marveled at how completely their lives had transformed. The man who had once measured success in hotel acquisitions and profit margins now evaluated each day by more meaningful metrics: how many families had been helped, how many children had been protected, how much healing had been facilitated. His business empire still existed, but it now served primarily as funding for the foundation's work. The Mansour Grand Hotel in London had been converted into a training centre for social workers and law enforcement officials, specialising in child trafficking cases. The penthouse in Dubai housed the foundation's Middle Eastern operations. Hotels in 12 cities now served as safe houses for recovered children during family reunification processes. "Daddy," Layla called from the living room where she was working on college essays, "can you read my Harvard application essay?" The essay, titled The Arithmetic of Hope, chronicled their family's journey from a perspective that was both deeply personal and analytically sophisticated. Layla wrote about the mathematics of searching, how each false lead had actually been a step toward the truth, how probabilities became irrelevant when love was the determining factor. But the essay's most powerful section dealt with multiplication, how their individual healing had multiplied into family restoration, which had multiplied into a global movement, which had multiplied into thousands of other families finding their way back to each other. "It's remarkable," Khalid said after reading it twice. "You found meaning in every part of our story, even the painful parts." "That's what you taught us," Layla replied. "That pain without purpose is just suffering, but pain with purpose becomes power." Omar appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. "I've been updating the Find Me Home algorithm based on feedback from the children who've used it successfully. Want to see the new features?" As his son demonstrated technical innovations that could help lost children communicate their locations and circumstances more effectively, Khalid realized that both twins had inherited his business acumen but had applied it to endeavors infinitely more meaningful than profit generation. Later that evening, as he had every night for 7 years, Khalid checked on his sleeping children. He found them in Layla's room, still talking quietly in the darkness, a habit that had never changed since their earliest days of recovery. "Still awake?" he asked softly. "We were talking about next year," Omar explained, "when Layla goes to Harvard and I start at MIT. Are you worried about being separated?" The twins exchanged one of their wordless communications, a language they'd developed during years of institutional survival and had never lost. "We know how to find each other now," Layla said simply. "We'll never be lost again." "Besides," Omar added, "Boston and Cambridge are practically the same city. We'll see each other all the time." As Khalid turned to leave, Layla's voice stopped him. "Daddy, do you ever think about that night in London? About what would have happened if you hadn't been there when we asked for help?" The question was one he'd pondered countless times over the years. The cosmic coincidence of timing that had brought them together at exactly the right moment, despite 8 years of near misses and false leads. "I think," he said slowly, "that some connections are stronger than circumstances. We would have found each other eventually somehow." "Do you really believe that?" "I believe that love creates its own kind of gravity. You two were always going to come home to me, just like I was always going to find you. The only variable was timing." As he finally turned off their light and headed to his own room, Khalid reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, from the devastation of loss, through years of desperate searching, to the miracle of recovery and the purpose they'd discovered in helping others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: foundation board meetings, university preparations, and the ongoing work of ensuring that other families wouldn't have to endure 8 years of separation. But tonight, his children were safe, healthy, and home. The boy and girl who had once stood in the London rain asking for just one meal had taught him the most important lesson of his life, that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the smallest requests, and that hope, no matter how improbable, is always worth maintaining. In the end, they hadn't just found each other again. They had found their purpose, their mission, and their way to transform one family's tragedy into a force for healing families around the world. Some hungers, Khalid had learned, would only be satisfied by coming home. But some homes were built not from buildings or geography, but from love strong enough to bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, and turn even the longest separation into the foundation for an even stronger reunion. As he fell asleep in his Geneva apartment, listening to the quiet sounds of his children's breathing down the hall, Khalid Al-Mansour knew that every day of searching had been worth this moment, and every moment of doubt had been transformed into unshakable certainty about what truly mattered in life. The story that had begun with just one meal, sir, had become a legacy of nourishing thousands of families with the most important food of all, hope that love would always find a way home.